Hello, friends. Welcome back to GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm the GM Philosopher. Today, I want to talk about a really important element of running games, something that a lot of game masters would do very, very well to remember. I think this is somewhere close to being like maybe the third most important decision for game masters to make before they run a game, after they run a game, and everywhere in between. And that is listening to your players. And I want to more specifically discuss that there are two things to keep in mind when you're doing this. When you're listening to players, there are two things to keep in mind that will help you to become a better game master, and that will also help you to understand when listening is the right path and when listening may not be the right path. Now, just so you know, I am the GM Philosopher. I have over 24 years of gaming experience under my belt. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button to stick with the channel. You're not going to want to miss what's coming down the pipe. A lot of exciting things going on here at GM Philosophy. You can also join our free Discord. Link to that is in the description as well. But now let's dive into the substance of this video. So there is a concept in marketing, and I've been in marketing since 2009. Marketing is mostly what I have done professionally for my life. This concept is that there is a lot of legitimate wisdom to be gleaned from listening to feedback. Okay, so this is true if we're talking about YouTube comments, if people are leaving reviews on your business, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of different ways that user feedback, customer feedback can be viewable to you. And then a lot of times people have this knee-jerk reaction, and it goes either one or two ways. Some people don't like responding or listening to or even looking at negative feedback. They want to hear the positives, but they don't want to hear the negatives. So this is the first sort of path you could take. This is not a good idea because when you actually pay attention to the people who criticize you or that leave you bad reviews or whatever, when you actually listen to them and you kind of dissect what they're talking about, this is actually really good for you. It helps you to learn, to grow, to become a better version of yourself, right? So if we're talking about marketing, this helps you to improve your business, improve your marketing techniques. Now, with that being said, we can apply this to being a game master as well. Some game masters would rather put their head in the sand than hear the negative feedback from their players. Some GMs might even be so afraid of the negative feedback or so averse to it that they won't even ask for feedback. There is a fear associated with hearing that you've maybe done something wrong or that someone didn't like something you did, right? This can threaten our sense of, that we're doing a good job. It can make us feel like, well, I'm a total failure or whatever, okay? Now, the trouble with this mindset is that it can keep you from really growing fast. So without criticism, if all you have to go on are like the yes, positive reviews, the yes man positive reviews, then you're going to be unaware of potential problem areas for longer. Okay. And this is a bad thing because the faster we close up those problem areas, the faster we actually start working on our lesser points, like our bad points, like the places that challenge us, the faster we start working on them, the better we're going to be able to improve. Okay. Now, for this reason, I fully endorse the idea, and I wholeheartedly believe this, that game masters should not only ask for feedback from their players, but they should listen to all of it, the good and the bad. Take the good feedback, like celebrate it. Be like, yeah, heck yeah, I deserve that good feedback. But also, when you hear negative feedback, don't shy away from it. Don't just think, oh, dumb player, or, well, you could have done this, like blaming it, deflecting. No. We want to take a good, honest look at that feedback. And we want to realize, there's some truth here that might be hard to hear, but it's probably something that I should look into. Now, with that being said, how do we know what to pay attention to in the negative reviews, in the negative comments, in the criticisms? This is the second part. And this is something that I think a lot of people misunderstand. And this is something that people misunderstand about business too. But people who learn about marketing and they learn kind of the modern culture of feedback, of review culture, like cancel culture, even like all these things. We're in an age of entitlement now where there are people who will leave sometimes legitimately ridiculous negative reviews for businesses, right? So I have seen some reviews for some businesses that were just plain wild, undeserved, and you can tell, right? You can tell. So here's the concept, the next concept I want to describe for you. And as game masters, we also need to keep this in mind, but you have to be careful with it. You have to learn where to draw the line. And it's this, the worst but the worst 5%, that's a pretty safe line. It might be more or less, but the worst 5% of reviews you get, the worst 5% of the feedback you get, like the most negative, hateful feedback you tend to get. The truth is, you want to be a little bit careful in paying too much attention, putting too much stock in your most negative feedback, because the truth is that there are people out there who just like to be negative, and there is some of it that might not be deserved, okay? Versus legitimate constructive criticism that you can learn from, right? So how do you know when feedback is just being negative? How do you know when a player is just being negative and maybe actually their problem wasn't your fault versus, you know what, that was my fault. That player has a valid point. I need to work on that. How do you know the difference? So I'm going to give you some pointers for how to tell when you should listen to that negative feedback from your players and when you might want to think, well, I don't know that that was really my fault, right? So I'm going to explain to you how to kind of pick this apart. So the first thing to understand is that even though like there are some negative comments that might actually just be a person being negative and hateful, and they're not really constructively educational for you, I call these troll comments or troll feedback or troll criticism. I get a lot of troll criticism on my channel. I'm going to say this might ruffle some feathers. Whenever people say things like trash thumbnails or AI slop, my friend, that is a troll comment. And this comes from people who just cannot seem to help but to spread negativity, to spread bad mood, to be negative, okay? And that's the truth of it. There are a lot of commenters out there who just want to complain, okay? Now, the truth is, as a game master, you're also possibly going to have players like this. It probably is going to be kind of rare. You see a lot more of this when you're dealing with thousands of people than when you're dealing with 6 people or 5 people. But it is possible that you may have a negative Nancy or two come through your table over your gaming career. But even those troll comments, even in that troll feedback, even in that very most negative or hateful feedback where it's kind of hard to see that there's anything constructive to it, it's also important to understand that there's usually at least a little kernel of truth in every one of those. Okay. So for example, when people say to me, AI thumbnail slop, I'm unsubscribing, for the most part, that's a troll comment. It's a troll comment. If you disagree, leave a comment. Let me know. Let me know if you're offended by me saying that. But they're troll comments. Okay. Why do I say they're troll comments? Because it's just people saying a negative thing. Like, people don't have to say a negative thing, right? Now, with that being said, there might be some wisdom to be gleaned from the idea, for me, of thinking, there's a question to be asked. Is it possible that I'm alienating a certain amount of my fan base or potential viewership base by using AI thumbnail art? And that hidden in all of these overly negative, sort of like not well-spoken troll comments, is it possible that there is some truth that maybe while it's not being well articulated would be good for me to pay attention to? Now, in this specific case, I do think there is some truth there to pay attention to. And I've done enough experimenting to know that I kind of think that the viewership has made itself pretty clear that there is a certain percentage of the TTRPG community that is inherently opposed to using AI images in my YouTube thumbnails, okay? And with that being said, there's an element of like, well, if I can find a way to stop doing that but still succeed to at least, roughly the same degree, well, then it would be in my best interest to do that, right? So there's wisdom there. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and feel bad about myself because someone says my thumbnails are AI slop, right? So I'm going to really cut it. I'm really going to cut it off at a certain amount. I'm mostly unbothered by such comments because I just literally don't pay attention to them. I just rule them out because in my mind, they're just overly negative people spreading negativity. I never go on other people's YouTube channels and just say, I hate that. Like, if I have something to say, I'll try to pose it in a way that brings my point across. And this is what brings us to D&D, being a game master, listening to your players. The truth is, you're going to get some feedback from players that might be so negative at times and kind of like unbased in reality, right? Sort of just disconnected from reality. That the truth is, you might just be able to ignore most of it. But look for that kernel of truth that it might be dancing around or hinting at. And that can sometimes be very helpful, even if it's hard to look at. Once again, all criticism is hard to look at, but that can help us to grow and become better. Okay, so that's item number one. Item number two, try to understand the intention behind feedback. Okay, some players are going to leave feedback, they're going to give you feedback, they're going to tell you their constructive criticism or whatever, and it's going to all be sort of verbalized like an attack on you that wasn't really articulated. And it might seem emotional and messy, and there might not seem like there's any kind of coherent, like set in stone actual complaint or criticism. It might be more of a barrage about how bad you did at this wide range of things or whatever, right? Versus a player who really coherently constructs a criticism and lays out kind of the lines where I think this was good, but this was like too much. This was too much. And this I did not like because of this, blah, 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 right? So it's important to understand that when you can understand the core motivations behind the feedback, it can help you to figure out exactly what it's about. Okay. When feedback is given in a very emotional way, like it's just, I hate you, you're terrible, you suck, your games suck, I hate your games, you're a terrible GM. Like that's an example of like very incoherent criticism. And the problem with incoherent criticism is that it's coming from an incoherent, probably emotional place. That person probably didn't plan to write or give incoherent feedback. They probably planned to give you honest feedback that reflected how they felt. But the fact that it was incoherent is evidence that they did not properly structure their own thoughts before delivering it. Hence, while they may not like how something felt, they honestly may not even understand what was wrong with it or where the problem happened. See what I'm saying? Whereas more carefully constructed criticism can give you a mindset into, oh, this person has analyzed their bad experience at my game table and they're trying to share information with me. The key here is to keep in mind that we can look at all of this and kind of try to back engineer this. We can try to back engineer those more emotional complaints that game masters may have. However, the truth is we have to understand that there is going to be some amount of bad experience. How much is very case by case, but there's going to be some amount of bad experience that players should probably take responsibility for and not project onto the GM. There are some things that the GM doesn't have control over, and there are some things that the GM shouldn't be expected to control. Okay. And a lot of times players who just like emotionally vomit towards you in like a criticism of your game for some reason, there's some possible percentage of that that's actually based from a problem that's coming from them, not from your performance as a game master. Though there's also probably somewhere you could improve your performance as a game master and help the problem. But first, we have to understand what the problem is. And that's the problem with incoherent feedback. So the point of this is to say this. We really need to do a rational analysis of the negative feedback we're getting as game masters before we can understand if there's something to be improved or if the player is emotionally reacting to something that actually wasn't in our control or that maybe we don't even want to change. Because it's also true that you cannot please everyone and you shouldn't try. What you should try to do is run the best game possible. And negative feedback, players giving you criticism, players telling you about the bad points, that can help you to learn to run the best game possible. But your job isn't to please everyone on planet Earth with your game either. There are also times when it's important for you to separate lines of like, I can see that you didn't like this, but I don't want to change that because I believe that that is what I should do. Now, can I maybe do it better? Of course, right? But if a player came to me and they said, GM Philosopher, I hate your games because there's a lot of NPCs. Like NPCs are talking quite a bit in your games. I hate it. You suck. I think that you're taking spotlight time away from the players. I think you should have no NPCs in your games. That's my criticism. So you should go learn about. You should learn from my criticism and take the NPCs out of your games. My response to that would be, okay, let's look at this. Is it true that I want the player characters to be the main characters? Of course. Is it true that maybe sometimes I might accidentally take some of that away with the NPCs? That is possible. The amount of time that happens is probably not zero. So there's a kernel of truth to this. I may want to look into that. I may want to analyze that. And maybe at my next game, I want to leave myself a little sticky note saying, hey, don't overtalk the players. Don't take the spotlight away, right? In moderation, all things in moderation. So there's the learning part of it for me. But maybe the criticism said to take the NPCs out altogether. I'm just not going to do that. Not only do I not want to do that, I'm not going to do it. I'm never going to do it. And if they have too big of a problem with it, honestly, that's not my fault. That's a them problem. And if it causes them to leave my game, that's fine. Because I know where that line is. I know just without a doubt from my experience as a game master that NPCs add to the game when they're done correctly. And if you take them out, you create bigger problems than any problem caused by the potential for a little bit of NPC overdoing itness, right? So that's the next thing you have to understand about negative feedback, is that when you're getting negative feedback from a player, it's really important for you to understand your style as a game master. It's important for you to understand what kind of game you're trying to run. It's important for you to understand what your goals are. And if a player's criticism is in conflict with your goals, then you probably are not it's probably not going to be in your best interest to listen to the whole criticism. It's probably in your best interest to look for the parts of it that are relevant, that will help you become better. But then there's probably a certain percentage of it that is just bound to be rejected, and for good reason, because they don't want the same thing. It's like, for example, if I go to a restaurant and they tell me the steak is $25, and then I say, you suck. This restaurant sucks. I want that steak for $10. This is my constructive criticism. Learn from it, or I'm going to leave and I'm not eating here anymore. Well, okay, I can say that all day till I'm blue in the face. But at the same time, what is this restaurant's goal? Well, one goal is probably to keep their doors open and pay their staff and pay their bills and stay in business and be profitable. Otherwise, there's no point to having the business to begin with. So if they have to price their steak at $25 in order to succeed at that, well, guess what? Maybe they could look at my criticism and think, okay, let's evaluate maybe where we're wasting money. Maybe if we cut back on waste so we be way more careful, we can lower our margins by another 5%. Maybe we could get that $25 steak down to $23.50 by cutting out needless waste in other areas, right? So this is an area where they might want to look at the criticism and think, okay, this is an opportunity for us to check ourselves on our prices. But if they say, oh, whatever, they just bow down to the customer and say, oh, whatever you want, well, you know what, $10 steaks all day, guess what? They're going to go out of business. And then there's going to be no steakhouse. And then me as a customer are going to be like, what? That was my place to eat. I got $10 steaks there. Now I got to go down the road and pay $28. And this sucks, right? So it's like some people cannot be pleased. And it's really important to understand this. It's important for the restaurant to understand that there's an element of my criticism that they're just going to have to disregard. And that's okay, because I'm a little detached from reality. If I'm legitimately saying the steak should be $10 and it's legitimately costing them $19.75 to get that steak to the table before any profit, right? Then I am actually, as the criticizing customer, I am detached from reality. That's kind of like when people comment on my thumbnails and say, AI slop, your channel is going to fail, but they don't realize that I have done hundreds of split tests to determine which one gets me more views. And the truth, by far, the winning thumbnails in my whole catalog of videos, AI thumbnails have gotten me far more views than the angry unsubscribers have cost me. See, there's a cost benefit analysis here. So when people say, I don't like your AI thumbnails, I wish you would use an image of you, this is understandable. And I understand this. This is a lot different than a comment that says something like, your channel is going to fail. This channel is going to go downhill because of this AI slop. Well, that is coming from a commenter who's actually detached from reality. They literally are talking about something they don't know and don't understand, right? So there's a difference. Is it in my best interest, to blindly follow all the feedback in my comments? No. If I blindly followed all of the YouTube feedback I got, this channel would have died a long time ago, and my business would have no hope of succeeding. What I have to do is make wise choices about the criticisms. And the same thing is true when you're a game master. When you're a game master, if you try to kowtow and bow down to every negative Nancy who might come across your table, guess what? Your games are going to get smothered to death and they're going to die. You need to protect your games. You need to protect your table. That's why it's important to know when to follow criticism, when to listen to it, when to take it into account, and when to say, you know what, maybe there's some elements of that are true, but there's some of that I need to disregard, right? So there's my thought for the day. A little bit of Game Master wisdom there from me, the GM Philosopher. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. Empowering Game Masters to run better games is our goal. I'll see you awesome people on the next one.